Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Duke Forest Annual Gathering. We are so delighted to have all of you here tonight. This is our first time back in person since 2019, which is the first time we actually held it in this beautiful space. And so again, thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's so heartening to see all the people that love the forest, support the work that we do as the forest team. So thank you so much. I am actually going to, I'm starting because we have a schedule to keep. They're not ready for my schedule. Okay, thank you, Blake. So I want to be able to turn it over here to Jamie, who is the historian here at the Forest History Society. And we have been the longtime beneficiaries of a wonderful partnership with the Forest History Society, and we really appreciate that collaboration. But Jamie, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, and welcome. So we are the Forest History Society. Woo! This is Duke Forest. We get along well. We love each other, but we are separate entities. We are an independent nonprofit library and archive dedicated to the collection, preservation, and dissemination of the world's forest and conservation history. Some of that includes Duke Forest. If you noticed in the lobby, we have a slideshow going. We've got the photos from the founding dean of the Duke Forest School then, Dr. Korstian. We have a lot of materials relating to it, but again, we're separate. The reason why I wanted to speak to you is to let you know, we're happy to have you here. We love that you're here, and yet we are independent of one another. Do not think of us as the Duke Forest History Society. We are in essence the world's Forest History Society. Okay, number one. Number two, as you leave tonight, feel free to swing by right before you exit the doors. You'll see a table to the right. It's loaded up with magazines. Help yourself. You'll see magazine racks. Help yourself. That is our magazine, Forest History Today. If you're a member, you get that. That's all the plugging I'll do, because Duke Forest needs your financial support as well as your continuing interest. So I'm not going to take $1 out of your pocket and put it in mine. So again, thank you very much. The last thing is, some of you came early and did a tour, and that was great. We loved having folks here. Just want to let you know that Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, we are open. You are welcome to come here, and you can do the self-guided tour in the exhibit hall. Right now, it's about Paul Bunyan. It'll be up through March. Then we'll change it out and do a new one. But you're welcome to come back and really dig into the myth and legend that is Paul Bunyan and the many ways it's been told over the last century and a half. So that's it. Sorry, one last thing. I just wanted our wine pourer tonight, Andy. So this is one of the other things we do. She interned with us processing some collections, and she did a great job. But what was really cool was she was not, I may get the story a little wrong, so I'm a historian who's going to play fast and loose with the history. But Andy wasn't sure she wanted to go into forestry until she discovered us, came and did some work with us. She's like, forestry is fascinating. I love this. Put me in the woods. I'm a happy camper, literally and figuratively. So Andy spent some time with us, and that's just one of the many things we do. So we have these educational outreaches. We have interns who come in and help us. If you know students on the high school, college, or grad school level who are looking for internships, paid or unpaid, they got to get a grade, whatever it is, and they're interested in forest and conservation history, please, please, please refer them to us. Our website is so easy. It is foresthistory.org. If you can't remember that, email Sara. Thank you so much. And again, enjoy. During the break, you're welcome to wander around. We'll be here. You're welcome to go in the library, pop out to the exhibit hall. Again, welcome, and please clean up after yourself. we don't have a real cleaning crew. It's us.
I think we
So,
have this, maybe.
or it's them. That's worse, right? So thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. All right, we're gonna dim the lights a little bit more so that you all have a good view of the screen. How's it look from the back? Can you see it all right? Okay, great. And how is the sound? Can you all hear me back there? Okay, awesome. I will try not to yell too much. A few other logistics. Forest History Society welcomes us here, but we do need to keep the food and drinks inside this room. But otherwise, we'll have a break at about 7 o'clock. You can enjoy, wander around. But for now, we're gonna get started. Well, sorry. It's okay.
We moved into the building and then COVID hit. So we're still trying to figure out the light switches. Bear with us. And we are recording this tonight.
Okay, I think we're good. Yes. Well, tonight's agenda, we're going to start with introductions. We'll have this year in review presentation that I'll provide. We'll have a break, and then we will listen to our special guest, Brena Jones, and I'll do a follow-up to Brena's presentation to give everybody an update on a pair of major stream restoration projects we've got in the works. And then Blake will announce the Clarence Korstian Award for this year, and we will close out. So please feel free to enjoy yourselves while you're here. We've got lots of food, lots of wine. And let me tell you some of the other folks that are here with me tonight that you can chat with at the break. So our whole team is here. We've got Tom Craven over here. We've got Blake and Maggie right here. Tim is out front. Zach is driving, and I've got Andy, who also has worked and interned with the forest and is really our volunteer extraordinaire, and she's working on her master's project with us at the Duke Forest. And we have Craig, our maintenance and infrastructure manager, in the back. So please, everything you see here tonight is made possible. Everything I can talk about, everything I can present on is made possible by this incredible team that I get to work with. So please join me in giving them a round of applause. Okay, and I would also like to acknowledge our advisory committee. We have some members in the audience tonight. Will Tricomi, Dr. Nikki Cagle are here. So our advisory committee is a cross-section of administrators and faculty members across Duke that we rely on to both support the work we're doing, advocate for the Duke Forest in different spaces, and generally be a source of advice and wisdom. And so we are very thankful to have the advisory committee. And for those of you that are here tonight, thank you so much for your support. Okay, so we're gonna start with a map because we're talking about a forest. And before I dig into some facts and figures about this land base that we can see here on this map, I actually would like to acknowledge some of the human histories of this land base, some of them that are less well known or less well understood. And I want to share with you just a snippet of a land acknowledgement that Dr. Nikki Cagle produced for us, produced on behalf of the Office of the Duke Forest, just to give you a little bit more setting about where we are and all of those human stories that came before us.
As Gould 1992 acknowledges, there is not a university in this country that is not built on what was once native land. That is true for Duke University and its Duke Forest land holdings. We would like to acknowledge, honor, and respect the diverse history of Indigenous peoples in North Carolina and across the settler states. We would also like to recognize their continuing connections to land, water, and culture, and pay respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. In addition, we acknowledge the overlapping histories of this land, including past violence and ongoing harm produced by the legacy of racialized slavery and oppression. We know of at least 4 sites where slavery was practiced on what is now considered Duke Forest land, including the Alexander Hogan Plantation in the Blackwood Division, the Robeson Mill and Barbie property in the Korstian Division, and the Couch property in the Durham Division.
And I'd just like to make a note on this land acknowledgement and some work that we're doing somewhat around it, somewhat inspired by it, but I think we have several of the researchers in the room tonight. We've been involved in an interdisciplinary project that was birthed out of the Franklin Humanities Institute to understand and lift up some of these stories. Dr. Nikki Cagle is now one of the lead PIs on this project. I think we have our 2 PhD students that have been the lead on these projects as well. Is Anita and Renata here? Awesome. Hey, y'all. Thank you for being here. And so let this just be a little bit of a teaser that in 2024, we will be installing a series of 3 signs in the Wooden Bridge area of the Korstian Division around the Robeson Mill site that does some work to help lift up these overlapping human stories, does some work to help tell us about how we read the landscape, to tell us clues about the past human histories on the forest. So stay tuned for that. That's coming in 2024. Okay, so back to our land base of today. West Campus in blue. We've got 6 divisions of the Duke Forest in green, heading west from Durham County all the way out to Alamance County. We also have this one little dedicated nature preserve called the Oosting Division. That's not open to the public. It doesn't have any roads or trails in it. It's been dedicated since the 1950s for observational research only. What's interesting here and that you can appreciate is that the forest has urban centers that are growing pretty fast, pushing up against it in a lot of directions. We've got Durham here, Chapel Hill and Carrboro here, and Town of Hillsborough up here. You know, from the census blocks, we know that, you know, as you head west from Duke's West Campus, up against these parts of the Duke Forest, we've got over 10,000 people per square mile. Now, when you get out to Alamance County, we're just looking at about 10 to 100 per square mile. So we manage across a very dynamic present day human population. We manage a set of lands that are these really funky shapes. And so that means we have a lot of edge or a lot of perimeter to the actual area that we manage. And that is indicative of a whole host of things that we deal with. And Tom could do a whole night on what those things are. So moving on, I want to mention that, you know, across this relatively small landscape, we are connected to lots of other conservation and managed and open space lands. And this map starts to give you a sense of that natural network that the Duke Forest is a part of. For those of you that have been following us for a little while, you'll be familiar with some of the connectivity conservation work that we've been doing in the region. I'll give an update on that a little bit later today. We actually have our geographer extraordinaire and ecologist, Julie Tuttle, with us here tonight. She's really the foundation of a lot of the work that we have been doing since 2015 to protect a natural network across this landscape. And then lastly, I want to show you this map because several projects that we talk about tonight have to do with New Hope Creek and this New Hope Creek headwaters watershed. So if you follow this gray boundary and then along the Orange River Basin boundary where Neuse River is to the north, the Neuse River Basin is to the north, Cape Fear Basin is to the south. This area here is a watershed that's called the New Hope Creek Headwaters Watershed. And within that, New Hope Creek itself is about 30 miles from its source all the way down to Jordan Lake down here. Within the headwater system itself, it's about 20 miles. And within Duke Forest, we have about 6 of those miles, or about 30% of that length of this river in this watershed. So that's fairly significant. And then area-wise, because of course, you know, this New Hope Creek is the major river in this headwater system, but smaller tributaries are draining all of the lands in this area. The Duke Forest land base, out of the 33,000 acres that this gray outline covers, the Duke Forest is over 5,000 acres, about 16% of that land base. And you can see that most of our land holdings are actually in this New Hope Creek headwaters land base. So just keep that in mind as we go along. So I think many of you are probably familiar with the mission of the forest, why we exist. We last updated this mission in 2018 with just a minor tweak to really convey that the forest is a stage for discovery and exploration across a wide range of topics and for a plethora of audiences. And that's something that's been growing a lot in the last decade. It's also there for the education of all students, and especially, oops, sorry, go back, especially regarding the stewardship of our natural resources, which as a professional staff of the Duke Forest is a particular expertise that we can bring out to the community, out to the students as well. So out of that mission, we have 5 overarching management objectives, which are somewhat presented in relative order of priority. We've got to do a lot of stuff to promote that teaching and research mission. We've got to do a lot of work out on the ground to sustainably manage the resources we have for timber, for water quality, for wildlife, and more. We do very specific work protecting rare species, unique ecosystems, and historic features. And then, of course, a lot of reason why all of you know us is because of the education and outreach opportunities we provide. And then lastly, but certainly not least, the recreational and aesthetic amenity that Duke Forest is as a natural land base. So importantly, we have a strategy that guides us almost day to day in what we're doing to accomplish those objectives. Our strategy is underpinned by 3 overarching goals that you see up here: stewardship for sustainability. And that's not just the natural resources, but that's the human resources on the team. That's the financial resources that we have to take care of, and how all of those can come together to advance the mission. Of course, research and teaching, contributing to scientific knowledge and also the interpretation of that data. And then community engagement. And the place we think we fit best with community engagement is really engaging folks to connect with and better understand our natural world. And something that's not listed here that I think Duke Forest can do uniquely well is also connect people with science. Demystify a little bit what is it that scientists are doing out in the woods, and how are they actually collecting data, and what does that mean? We can take you out to actually meet researchers and understand that. So this is really it's been a very busy November, but honestly, one of the funnest parts of my year is pulling together this year in review presentation, which I definitely do not do on my own either. Every single one of my staff members has contributed to this work and this information somehow. But it is just so incredible, even in this a very frenetic and busy time, to see how much interesting, unique work gets done on the forest because of what the forest itself provides, because of what this team is doing every single day. And it's really just very rewarding to be able to present a lot of this information to you all tonight. So again, why I appreciate you all being here. So we are going to go through some facts and figures from our year in review, and I'm going to give you some really fun examples of the things that are going on. So in research, in that fiscal year, we had over 65 active projects. That represented 41 different lead principal investigators or researchers, over 13 institutions, and about $5.75 million. And that's only about half of folks reporting to us how much money was actually getting spent on grants that were focused in the Duke Forest. So a pretty large impact there. The awesome folks that you see on this screen are all New Hope Creek researchers. So this is Johnny Behrens. Johnny is a PhD student in Emily Bernhardt's lab, and he is doing work with some fellow lab members and students essentially to understand how insects are responding to contaminants within the water body. And he's doing this work in New Hope Creek actually as a reference site to Ellerby Creek. So we know Ellerby Creek is a highly impacted urban creek in downtown Durham, and the Duke Forest and New Hope Creek in this location can be a reference site for that. Nick Marzolf here is a postdoctoral researcher in Emily Bernhardt's lab. This is one of the students or lab mates that he works with. And he has recently installed a series of wells and sensors along the creek that are helping to measure the greenhouse gases that are either produced by the creek or moved through the creek system somehow. And this is actually really important globally because there's actually not a great model of how a river system like New Hope Creek is modulating our greenhouse gases. So when we think about climate change, we need to have good models to really think about impacts and how things are changing. Nick is doing some of the foundational work with Emily Bernhardt's lab to figure that out. And then here we have Sara Kelso, an amazing undergraduate student that worked with Dr. Cagle as well. And she is holding in this bag this dwarf water dog, a fully aquatic salamander that had not been seen in the Duke Forest since 1969. When the herpetological curator from the Museum of Natural Sciences called me in 2022 and said, Sara, can I come look for this animal? The last known record in Duke Forest is 1969. These animals are super sensitive to contaminants in the watershed. I just want to know if they're still around. And sure enough, Dr. Brian Stewart found several in his first season. And then Sara finished a season up last year of doing additional surveying to really get the full scope of the population of this salamander that still exists in the watershed. So again, just another amazing testament to the quality provided by the Duke Forest and that's helping to ensure that biodiversity can remain. Now I want to mention another project under research, and one of the favorite things I get to facilitate are research projects that actually speak to or help advance one of the management goals we have. So in this case, this is a research project that is advancing our wildlife management goals. It happens to be a Bass Connections project, which is a interdisciplinary set of projects where faculty and undergraduate students and graduate students come together and they do work on a real world problem. So innovations in research technology to assess forest wildlife, this is really looking at the loss of biodiversity. And what they wanted to do was essentially pilot a series of methods that they could put out in the woods together to actually capture better and more accurate data on what wildlife are out in the woods and what habitats they're using. So what's really fun about this, and a huge strength of the Duke Forest, is its proximity to campus. So Duke Forest has this infrastructure, it's got a team that facilitates work there, it's highly accessible, and so it facilitates teams like this piloting work in the Duke Forest so that they can then take it over to Ivindo National Park in Gabon, where there's no accessibility, there's only boat accessibility to these research sites. They can deploy these methods that they have tested and analyzed from the Duke Forest in Gabon. And in particular, they're looking at elephants in Gabon. So really, again, Duke Forest enabling global research. And this is just one example of many. Okay, and this is a fun shot, because of course we had these camera traps deployed across the Duke Forest. So I want you all to tell me who you see that came and visited us this April. Does anybody see him? Jeff, what is it? Yeah. That's right. So we had a couple sightings of black bears, and there are resident populations of black bear on the coast, in the mountains. We know the young males will move to find new territory in the spring. And I spoke to the wildlife biologist for the state about this, actually, Joe, and because we were having just anecdotally, lots of people were telling us about seeing bears, not in the forest, but just around in the Piedmont. And he said, I think there was a good reproductive year a couple of years ago, but he said, I also think that their habitat and their range is expanding into the Piedmont. So really interesting. And now let me talk about our formal teaching uses. So these are teaching activities led by faculty at any institution, undergraduate, graduates, or K through 12 teachers or lifelong learning leaders. And we had about 44 activities last year representing 25 unique educators. That was over 300 visits to the forest by classes and over 1,000 students. Some examples that you can see here. This is actually, I believe this was the inaugural year of the Let's Talk About Climate class that Duke offered to foster conversations among incoming undergrads about climate change. And this is our dear Maggie leading the undergraduates on a tour of the Shepherd Nature Trail, which is actually really easily adaptable to telling a story about climate change in our ecosystems. Here we have Nikki, you're in this slideshow a lot. Dr. Nikki Cagle here with her dendrology course. And every year, Nikki invites Vicki Jeffries, who is an herbalist and tribal administrator with the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation. And she comes and talks to the students about contemporary indigenous uses of pines, which still include basket weaving. I was there one time where we were doing tea making. So just some excellent examples of the types of teaching activities that the forest facilitates. I also want to mention this amazing work that Research Laboratories of Archaeology out of UNC is doing in the Duke Forest. And the teaching part is that they're actually, they've done 2 summers now where they bring out 25 undergrad and graduate students to do a field school in the Duke Forest to learn techniques of archaeology. And so there is a lot going on with this work in particular, and what it's telling us about the indigenous history and past on the Duke Forest. So I invite you all, we have a whole page on our website that connects to different stories and different findings from this work. But again, just a really fun example of teaching use that occurs on the forest. And then lastly, I want to mention another Duke-based project where they have these 10-week intensive programs either in coding or analyzing data or something to do with climate, where they bring together undergraduate students from all disciplines. They don't have to have any particular expertise, but they match them up with professionals or faculty, and the students come together and produce a product for a client. And so we have been, for years, I've wanted to have a Duke Forest data portal where researchers and teachers could come and just have an interactive application to see all of the data we have of Duke Forest. Well, these 6 undergrads, plus some of their mentors, essentially designed an amazing prototype that we are working right now with one of the members, Jean, to actually put that into production. So that should also be coming soon in 2024. So fantastic example of a teaching use that we're also leveraging for the mission of Duke Forest. Okay, management. Now this is really a catch-all for so much of the day-to-day work that goes on out in the field. You know, there's harvest work, there's stand improvement work, there's planting, there's all the road and trail maintenance, which, you know, that's almost 100 miles done in 1 year. There's boundary line maintenance. And of course, our entire system of management, everything that goes on in the field, but everything that goes on in the office as well, is certified against the Forest Stewardship Council standards, which essentially hold us to a set of ecological, environmental, and economic goals or principles. And we get audited against that every single year. So I want to dive into a particular management activity that was done. And Andy here, our intern from last summer, was key in getting this project finished. But this is our decadal recreation survey. So I'm sure, did all of you walk past one of these signs in the woods this past year? Yes. Well, we appreciate that because many of you filled out the survey associated with it. What you might not have known is that you were also being counted when you came in. So there was a set of 16 gates that were being monitored by camera traps, and that was getting rotated. And we did that so that we could create an estimate of the number of annual recreational visits. The survey was to look at visitor perceptions, demographics, and user habits. And then, because this work got started by one of Andy's colleagues at the Nicholas School, Christine Martin, in her master's project work, we also had an economic valuation of the value of all those annual trips to the forest. So I'm going to show you a little bit of those results. So this is just for 16 Duke Forest gates. We captured 136,950 visits. Most of those folks were walking. There was a good number of cyclists, and of course, equestrians were less than 1%. Now, with those folks, there were over 31,000 dogs that came to visit. And I think we all know and appreciate that. So we'll get back to these numbers in a minute. I want to tell you something that I pulled out of the survey for us to think about. And if any of you have been following us since the pandemic, you might know that we had a realization that apps on people's phones were driving use of the Duke Forest in ways we had no idea about, which meant that there were lots of unauthorized trails getting developed, lots of new access points getting created, just all kinds of stuff that really undermined our ability to take care of some of the resources in the forest. And so, I looked at this data, but I think we had 828 respondents to this survey. I think it's over 85, maybe 90% of folks indicated they are using some app when they're out there. That really blows my mind. So you can see some icons for the different apps that they are using. And this is something that's really telling to us. We have been paying attention to this for a while, and we will continue to. Let me tell you about that estimated economic value that we were able to derive. So real quick, you'll notice that this total visits to all gates is different from that number on the slide 2 slides ago. That's because we took that number that we had from the 16 gates and we essentially extrapolated it out to the other, because we have a total of 43 public access gates. And we could do that by binning the rest of our gates into high, medium, and low use gates and creating a value for how many visits those high, medium, and low use gates get. And then we multiply it all out and we add it together. And so across the whole forest, we're estimating nearly 200,000 visits. With information that was compiled from that survey, and this was the travel cost method was used, and I will not get into that, but essentially what was derived was that each visit to the forest was worth $33. So when you multiply that, 33, by almost $200,000, that's the total annual visit value that you get from the Duke Forest. It's huge. So, there are lots of ways to look at the value of the forest. A monetary value is only one, but it is quite striking. Okay, so take-home messages in pictures. People love the forest. Everybody loves the forest. Everybody, for the most part, knows why it exists and supports its mission. And when they're out there, they're having a great time and mostly feel very safe. When they don't feel safe, it's often the small number of folks that don't have their dogs on leash. And that is really the #1 complaint that we hear. So take-home messages is that, this is something that's known. It's known to anybody that manages lands that are open for public recreation, but it's something we continue to pay attention to. And then that use of apps, we are continuing to track that and, even incorporating that into our management now. We're monitoring digital app data to understand how people are using the forest. Okay, and so we take all of this and we know, what? It takes a village to take care of this forest forever. And we have a lot of people in that village, and we need to just continue sharing the message that every single visitor to the Duke Forest is really empowered to also be a steward of the Duke Forest, and that together we will keep it the resource that we love. Yes. So engagement and outreach, this is when we lead tours. Here's Dr. Nikki Cagle again. We call on her a lot. She is leading our favorite flora and fauna tour. Here are some researchers, Ram Oren and his PhD student Cheney, leading the research tour last year. You can see how many activities, how many people, how many hours of outreach we did. And then some of you that have been at this meeting before, you've heard me talk about this boost program that I just love. You know, it's so interesting that this research shows that students lose their interest in the sciences in those elementary and middle school years. And Boost is specifically a program designed to try to reverse that trend and engaging underrepresented students in the professional sciences. And so we are always so grateful to host some of the Boost students every summer. So volunteers, you are also our village. Judd, where are you? You've got a big... This is Judd and Mary, of course. Here are some of our community scientists looking at a herp transect. And you can see the stewardship projects, the community science, number of volunteers, the number of hours, the data collection visits they're doing. I mean, it's really incredible. Our forest stewards had its inaugural year in the 22-23 fiscal year. And the photography corps was almost so successful, it worked itself out of a job. And so we're not hosting the photography corps anymore just because we are so full of amazing photographs that we can use to communicate about the forest that we're essentially, Blake is just engaging photographers one-on-one. We have special projects. And so that's really working out terrifically. So let me see how I'm doing. Oh, I have 1 minute left. We can do this. Okay, let me run through some team and project updates. We got a bigger umbrella. What this means, I'm sorry, I had to entertain myself as I was making this presentation. What this means is that Duke, that announced its very ambitious climate commitment last year, has now stood up as of July 1 of this year, the Office of Climate and Sustainability, which is now going to be led by just past dean of the Nicholas School, Toddy Steelman, and she will have a vice provost and vice president role. So this office really uniquely straddles, unlike most offices, both the academic side of the university and the operations side of the university. And so I think this is an incredible moment for Duke. And what makes a lot of sense is that some of these other units, such as the gardens, such as the forest, such as the farm, Sustainable Duke, some from the Nicholas Institute, that we all be just part of this umbrella now, just to help enhance collaboration and how we can amplify work towards the climate commitment. And this is really already bearing fruit. These units, and we talk to each other, of course, already, but because of this new umbrella, these units, we've already got a new spring breakthrough for undergraduates planned for next year. So we got a bigger umbrella, and I think it's wonderful, and it only means good things for Forest going forward. Our team is growing, and I didn't even realize when I made this slide how big we would actually be, but we really are growing. So we were so lucky to add both Tim and Zach this year. They are amazing and have really helped build the capacity in both our office and in the field. But also right now, I'm so elated to announce that we are getting to the final interviews for a new assistant director of teaching and research for the forest. So this is, in a way, the job I have done since 2011. And I've kept it close because it's mission, right? It is the Duke Forest mission. And it's just so amazing that it's somewhat of a culmination of a 10-year strategy to have built out the team enough that I can release this work to a new assistant director of teaching and research at the forest. So stay tuned. We'll hopefully have an announcement for you in December. We are also, because of the times we are in, the population levels that we have, for the first time ever, looking for a part-time position to help us work with some recreational issues, boundary maintenance issues, but also to be a liaison to that first responder community. We manage Duke lands well away from West Campus, well outside of where Duke University Police can provide service. And we really rely on our local volunteer fire departments, professional fire departments, sheriff's offices, and it's really just become high time that we have a dedicated person connecting those dots, and then also taking a little bit of work off of Tom and I's plate when we have an issue and have to document things and so forth. So we're actively looking, that'll be about a half-time role for that as well. So maybe by the end of the year, we will be at 8.5 full-time staff, which I think will be the largest staff the forest has ever had. Okay, I'm definitely over my minute. Really quick though, we've had an extraordinarily successful 5-year strategic plan. Blake did a great communications that was highlighting every e-log, highlighted an example of that. We are in the process of updating this for the next 5 years, but it's been on a partial hold while we suss out some of these new initiatives that are either university-wide, like climate, like experiential learning, like diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We are bringing these, what we're calling through line themes, into our strategy now. And we also have some forest specific pieces we're going to update this plan with. One is about a new property that has some infrastructure we hope to turn into a teaching and research center. And one, this big questions, it really captures accurately what we're talking about there. It's things like we're talking to Dr. Jim Clark, who's a researcher in the room with us tonight, about what is the forest of 100 years like? And what should we do anything about it? Really big questions that involve ethics and philosophy just as much as they do ecology and management. And we are still connecting. So I mentioned Julie Tuttle, who's with us tonight. I think all of you know since 2015, we've been convening partners across the region to work on connectivity, conservation. Just this year, Julie finished an expansion of this analysis work to include all of Durham County. So it used to just include, just imagine the map goes this way, parts of Eno River and the New Hope Creek watershed down to Jordan Lake. Now it includes all of Durham County. So we have a more expanded area. We've adapted by giving ourselves a new name, which is just Triangle Connectivity Collaborative. We've got a report. You can check all of these things out at this website here. And I want to tell you about, we completed a strategic action plan, gosh, maybe a year or 18 months ago now. But one of the awesome things that just happened was that we had a land use planning workshop where our current coordinator, Brooke Massa from the Wildlife Resources Commission, again, very important partners, invited elected county and city officials, the planners in those municipalities, community members, and they actually did a workshop about how do you use this data on where are the connected habitat patches and corridors in the day-to-day work of doing land use planning. So I think that's a pretty huge success. That happened just earlier in October. Okay, and then lastly, again, our village expands. As I mentioned, the inaugural year of the Duke Forest Stewards Program was in this fiscal year, and these are the lovely, lovely folks that are walking designated routes and telling us about all the things they find that are going on those routes. They're really acting as ambassadors out there in the woods where, we're just 7 people for 7,100 acres. And look, they've amplified us by at least double, more than double. So we're really thankful to the forest stewards and everybody that participates. That is a program, as well as our community science program, that makes a huge difference for us, and we will continue to bring forward. All right, we got to the end. And I think I'll take 4 minutes for questions, and then we'll take a break. Does that sound good? Anybody have any questions they want to talk about now? Oh, yes. Yes, so the question was, where is the archaeology work occurring? So it's occurring in the New Hope Creek bottomlands that you can access. People might be familiar with the Hollow Rock Nature Park. There's a Duke Forest Gate directly across from that. If you use that Duke Forest Gate to go down to the creek and you walked upstream, you'll probably remember in your head that it's very flat off to your right there. You're along the stream, and all of the forest area is a very wide floodplain there. That's where that archaeology work is occurring. And when the field school is active, they actually put out signs on the trails and invite members of the public to come talk to the students. Yes. So look for that next summer. We expect we'll have them back. And I say summer, but it really starts up, it's May to June. Great question. Yes, Jeff. That was Durham, gate 10. Yeah, sort of near the tracks. Yep. If you go inside gate 10, which is off of Highway 751, it makes a loop and you go right towards railroad tracks. Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the question was, what's the status of coyotes? We're hearing them a lot at night, and I hear them in my urban Durham neighborhood as well. And so, Brena, I don't know if you have a pulse on this. I mean, the general story is that coyote populations have been expanding from the Rockies for decades. They're doing very well here. They're very successful, but I don't have any specific knowledge on what Wildlife Resources Commission is saying about their population status right now. But yeah, there are a lot of them out there. And there's something, we actually just had an inquiry about a dog-coyote interaction in the woods. I mean, there's lots of good reasons to keep your dogs on a leash, but protecting them from coyotes is a gigantic one. Because it will be fairly common for a coyote, especially that may be protecting its young, to try to make sure that a dog doesn't come near its young or come near its den. And so, we know that they're here, we know that they're reproducing here, and so that's just an extra precaution. And I had reached out to our district biologist to say, does this sound like normal behavior to you? And he said, absolutely. This is the time of year and this is what they're doing. So good question.
On that note.
Yes.
And we have the designated forest sections for deer hunting.
Yes.
And I understand that coyote hunting season is year round.
Yes.
Because they're so prevalent. Is that not something that the Duke Forest industry that promotes the deer hunting, which is decreasing in numbers because people just don't feed it, don't do that much. Could that not be an option to open it up for that?
So the question is about essentially the relationship of doing some coyote hunting during our deer management season. Or year round. So a couple things on that. The only reason why we are hunting in the Duke Forest, it's really not for that recreational value that hunting absolutely provides. It's really that population control. We recognize, Judd collected data for years and talked to fellow researchers and managers for years about the problem that overpopulations of white-tailed deer were causing in the forest. So we have made they are, but maybe not quite at the same level. But what I'm trying to share is that we had a targeted reason to intervene in that particular animal's population, whereas we don't have that for coyote yet. There is a natural range expansion occurring. Their dynamics of how they will live around here will continue to sort out, but we don't have a management justification to actually go and hunt them. Hunting is not part of our mission. We do get asked from our hunters if they can take coyote on the Duke Forest, and we tell them no. That's not the purpose of the hunt. The purpose of the hunt is does. Feral hogs will do the same thing. Yes. So oh yes, Bob. We'll take this last question and then we'll let you all have a break.
Duke Forest has some amazing geological resources.
Yes.
Two major, geological provinces together.
Yes.
You are drilling a well on campus. I just wonder if that could enter into your interpretation of resources of the forest.
Yes. So we do think about the underlying geology and its implications quite a bit. what they're doing, so on campus, right, they're working in that sedimentary basin, the Triassic Basin, which is much younger, just about 200 million years old. Most of the forest lands are in that really ancient Carolina terrain, which is over 650 million years old, gives rise to really a rainbow of soils that then produce the diverse habitat types we have. Some things we're doing along that line are actually thinking about the shortleaf ecosystem and restoration of the shortleaf ecosystem along those diabase ridges and so forth. But we do think about geology quite a bit. I love geology in particular. But no, we don't have any active research that's really lifting that up. Okay, so let's move into, can I shorten our break? Okay, how about we take a 10-minute break? So we'll reconvene at 7:23, and then we'll have plenty of time for Brena's presentation. Thank you all so much. Okay, everybody, we're gonna get started with our special guest speaker, and our senior program coordinator, Maggie, is gonna come up and introduce Brena for us.
Hi, everybody. I feel really lucky to be introducing Brena tonight. The Duke Forest staff has had the great fortune to meet Brena just earlier this year, and we've begun working with her as our work has really ramped up around planning our New Hope Creek stream restoration projects. Thanks for the music is still on. We got some nice, background tunes. Thanks, Blake. So Brena has already been a tremendous resource, not only for our staff, but also for students at Duke. Just yesterday, Blake and I actually got to join Brena on New Hope Creek as she and her colleague Mike were reintroducing notched rainbow freshwater mussels into a stretch of New Hope Creek that flows through the Duke Forest. And I feel like every time I'm around Brena, which has only been a handful of times, she says a fact about freshwater animals in particular that is mind-blowing. And so we are really lucky to be getting to hear from her tonight, and I'm sure your mind might be blown tonight as well. So let me tell you a little bit about Brena. Brena Jones is the Central Region Aquatic Wildlife Diversity Research Coordinator at the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. In this role, she's responsible for researching and surveying freshwater animals, including fish, mussels, crayfish, and snails, specifically in the Yadkin Pedy, Cape Fear, Lumber, and White Oak River basins. Tonight, Brena is going to share with us how critically important these animals, and especially mussels, are to our freshwater ecosystems, and she'll reveal the fascinating yet hidden life they lead under the surface of the water and why their populations are so threatened. So please please join me in welcoming Brena.
Thank you, Maggie. Although I feel like you set the bar really high. So I will try to be entertaining as best I can. Well, I really thank you all for having me here tonight and for including me in your event. It's been really great to get to know Sara and Maggie and all the folks here at Duke Forest this year. It's an amazing place to be able to work. It's so nice to not have to wade through thickets of privet and poison ivy to actually get to the stream. So that's a real treat for me in and of itself. Does this little clicker do the clicking? Yeah. Yay. Okay. I'm easily entertained, sorry. So I wanna, before I get into the meat of my presentation, I wanna give you a little bit of context about the program that I work with so you can kind of see where I'm coming from and understand what I do in my day-to-day job. I'm part of our Aquatic Wildlife Diversity Program. We're in the Inland Fisheries Division. If you haven't figured it out already, we like to give really long names to our programs and our job titles. Sorry, and they keep getting longer all the time. So our program operates under the guidance of our State Wildlife Action Plan. This is a congressionally mandated plan that we put together. We were actually the first state in the country to have a completed wildlife action plan. This began under the State Wildlife Grants Program implemented by Congress in the early 2000s. So this covers all of the species and habitats that we work with in the state and is a guiding document, not just for us, but for all of our partners as well. It's, I don't know, like a 1,500-page document. So if you can't sleep one night and you're really curious, you can look it up on our website. There are also downloadable map layers. You can see where priority areas are. You can see species lists of all of our rare species in all the taxa across the state, from birds to fish to crayfish to everything else. So we have a plethora of goals that we try to work towards through the Wildlife Action Plan, which include, of course, understanding species diversity on the landscape, trying to work with and conserve habitats and native and natural communities, and also support education and improved regulations for our natural resources. But to me, one of the most important things that we do is foster partnerships like this one that we've just started with Duke Forest that I'm so excited about, because we really can't do this work by ourselves as an agency. We have very few people. My whole program statewide is 8 people. We were 6 people when we started, so I guess 8 is better. But we cover a really huge area and a huge number of animals, and it's just not possible without our partners. So these are some of the major collaborators that we've worked with over the years, and you can see it's a real mix from federal and state resource agencies to NGOs to private corporations. And I'm hoping Sara will let me add the Duke Forest logo to this as well, now that we've got a partnership there. We also work with all kinds of different sides of NGOs and private citizens as well. So I'm always open to a new partner. It really excites me when we get more people involved in this work, because it's just more eyes and more people out on the landscape. So I work with 4 different taxa, as Maggie mentioned. I work with fish, crayfish, mussels, and aquatic snails, and all freshwater species. Our agency only has jurisdiction over freshwater. There's an arbitrary imaginary line drawn in the rivers, and it becomes Division of Marine Fisheries once you pass that imaginary line. And they move that line sometimes just to confuse us. So we also look at the habitats that are important to these species, which includes rivers and streams, but also the areas that surround them, including forests and other riparian habitats like wetlands and those types of things. So I want to start out just introducing you to the 3 main types of streams that we think about when we're talking about watersheds and some of the key characteristics of these things. I like to think of streams and rivers as the circulatory systems of our ecosystems and of our communities across the world. So these are all like different sized blood vessels in your body. So first, we've got our ephemeral streams. These generally are channels that only carry water during a storm event. So they look dry most of the time, but they're really, really important for processing organic material. For example, bugs breaking down leaf material, stick material decaying, providing organic material that feeds the whole food web. These channels also are really important for helping settle out and retain sediment, so it doesn't all just travel right into the main rivers where it does a lot of damage. So if the ephemeral streams are like your little peripheral capillaries, they then move into the intermittent streams. These are slightly larger channels. They flow seasonally. So you'll see them, for lack of a better word, they're wet during wet times and dry during dry times. That's just how that works. I can't explain it better than that. But these intermittent channels, these are really the meat of a watershed and often make up to 80% of a watershed. And these are just some of the functions that they perform. They're really important for flood control, for water supply and groundwater recharge, allowing water to soak back into the soil, replenish those groundwater resources that many of us, I know I'm on a well, so I certainly care a whole lot about groundwater. They also do nutrient and sediment storage, which is really important. And it's where a lot of energy and food source processing occurs. Again, more bugs, more things breaking down things like leaf material. Energy from the sun, which drives all life on the planet, gets captured by trees, but that has to be translated into the animal food web in order for it to eventually get to us. And in streams is where a lot of this occurs. They also are really important to organisms for reproduction and rearing of their young. If you are a parent animal, you want to deposit your children someplace where they're not going to get devoured immediately, or at least they're going to get devoured more slowly. And in these smaller intermittent channels, There are fewer predators, less concentrated in these smaller habitats. So these are better areas for nursery of tiny little baby creatures. So once you move out of intermittent channels, you move into the perennial streams. These are streams like New Hope Creek that generally flow all year round. They are usually where water intakes are located. They're, of course, very important habitat for all kinds of aquatic species and animals that interface with the land, water. Can't think of a better word than interface right now. So there you go. Things like frogs, birds, muskrats, other animals that move back and forth between aquatic and terrestrial habitats. They're also really important for recreation. And of course, as we're seeing in times like we're in right now, these are a summer or dry season refugia for animals that when all of these intermittent channels and some of the smaller perennial channels have dried up during a drought period, these larger perennial channels are critical to allow those animals to move into and survive until it rains again, which presumably will happen someday. I'm hoping this weekend. So in summary, any stream is only as healthy as its upstream channels. And these ephemeral and intermittent channels are so much more than just storm drains. Unfortunately, these are the channels that are usually lost first. They're covered up, they're filled in, they're not really treated with the importance that they deserve, but they're the heart and the lifeblood of a watershed. And an intact food web of native species in a stream is a really important indicator of the health of the stream. And if we see places that we're losing species and we're losing diversity, that also means we're losing the quality of our drinking water supply, we're losing our human community health, and we're losing recreational opportunities. So these are signs that we need to pay attention to these things and see what we can do to reverse these trends. So now I'm going to move into talking about freshwater mussels. Maggie said I always give her fun animal facts. Actually, the reason I went into zoology, I went to college to be an English teacher, and then I took zoology and discovered you could have a whole career in fun animal facts. So I said, yes, this is for me. So that's why I'm here now, because fun animal facts. Freshwater mussels are amazing creatures. I could talk about them for hours. I will try not to. They are considered the most endangered animals in North America, and they're actually one of the most endangered group of fauna in the world in terms of percentage of species that are imperiled. We have the world's greatest diversity of freshwater mussels here in the southeastern United States. So we're a global biodiversity hotspot in this area for mussels. In North Carolina, depending on who you talk to and what day of the week it is, we have 65-ish species of native mussels. That number is changing all the time. Just in the past 2 or 3 years, I've been involved in 2 new mussel species descriptions, one of which is an entire new genus that we've never even seen before. We had to make up a name for. So we're still discovering new biodiversity on the landscape all the time with these animals. Unfortunately, at least 10 of the species that were here have already become extinct or have been extirpated from the state. Now, something is extirpated, that means that it is gone from one particular area, but there may still be individuals left in other areas. So it's like a local extinction. Of the species that are remaining, over 70% are considered rare and in need of conservation. And I put these numbers together quite a few years ago, so they're all higher now, unfortunately. These are some of the rare mussel species that are present in New Hope Creek and in this part of the Upper Cape Fear watershed. You can see that we have a good diversity, at least as far as mussels on the Atlantic slope go, in terms of colors, shapes, sizes. If you look at each of these mussels, this little pointer thing, yeah. So you've got the common name of the mussel here, and there's 2 letters after each name. These letters designate the level of listed imperilment of the species. So FT stands for federally threatened. The Atlantic pigtoe is a species that was actually just listed within the last few years as a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. ST or SE means state threatened or state endangered. So these are animals that are just listed at the state level by the Wildlife Resources Commission. They have not reached a federal listing level yet. So that's the difference between those. Here's the notched rainbow that Maggie just mentioned. We put a bunch of babies back in the stream yesterday. The water was very cold, but they seemed okay with it. My arm was less okay with it. But it's okay now, in case you're worried. So one of the most amazing things, one of the many amazing things about freshwater mussels is their unique life cycle. And one of the key factors is that they require a fish host to carry their juveniles for a portion of their life cycle. And not only that, it has to be the correct species of fish that corresponds with that species of mussel. And each mussel has a different species of fish or series of species of fish. Well, not series, they only use one at a time, but more than one, you know what I mean, that they use. And so this is why native communities are really important, because if the mussels larvae get on the wrong species of fish, that fish's immune system will kick them off. They cannot complete their life cycle. So I'm going to walk you through the mussel life cycle and show you some pictures so you can see how this works, because this is a pretty amazing process. So it starts out, as it does for most sexually reproducing animals, it starts out with a male mussel and a female mussel. And mussels actually do practice internal fertilization. What will happen is the male will release their sperm into the water column. The female mussel will then draw that in through their siphons, and that will internally fertilize their gametes in their body. But this is a really good illustration of why when these animals' numbers get really low and a species is really rare, they again fail to reproduce because they're not close enough to each other. They can't find each other. If you just have to find random sperm floating around in the world, that's a pretty hard job sometimes, for a mussel anyway. I won't go any farther down that road, I promise. So anyway, mussels. So once the female has completed fertilization inside her body, she now has fertilized larvae, which are called glaucidia, and they're parasitic larvae. But now the female has to solve a problem. She has to get these larvae onto a fish. And if you're a mussel, you don't have wings or a whole lot in the way of legs. She just got one foot. She just kind of sits there. How does she get a fish to come to her? Well, what she does is many species of mussels will actually make a lure to draw a fish in. And I'm going to play this little video here, or I'm going to try to. And what you can look at is, we'll just show the mouth on here. So see, there's two little eye spots here on this little dark thing. This is actually a lure that the female mussel has made out of her own body tissue. It extends out. So if they're sitting there like this and their shell is open a little bit, they've got this lure. They have this lure sticking out, and they are going to try to make it look interesting to a fish. So let me play this video. If you watch, she's going to move that to imitate a fish's movement and try to get a fish to come take a bite out of that. So if you're a largemouth bass, say, or a bluegill or red breast sunfish, you're going to go, this looks delicious. I'm going to go check this out. And there's a whole wide variety of lures that mussels can use. Next one I'm going to show you, this is one that actually has made an entire crayfish, and it swings its whole body back and forth, doing a very convincing crayfish impression, saying, hey, come take a bite out of me. I've got a tasty donut here waiting for you. Here's another type of lure that a mussel has produced. These are actually little, looks like you can get them at a bait store. She will release these out free floating into the water column. Inside of them, these little globules you can sort of see, those are all glaucidia packed in there, just waiting for a fish to bite into it and release them. So she produces these on an annual basis using her own resources. So these are some of those little packets here that have been released out into the river. This darter has decided, yeah, that really does look delicious. I'm gonna check this out. So darter grabs a mouthful of this glaucidia packet, and then when the fish bites into it, the packet explodes and releases the little glaucidia larvae, just basically explodes in the fish's face and in their gill cavity. A glaucidia larvae really at this point only consists of two shells with these two little hook teeth on the end of it, and it's got one good snap in it. And that is their entire capability at this point. So they will snap on to whatever they encounter, which is hopefully gill tissue or fin tissue of a fish. Once they're on there, they will insist themselves in that tissue and live there as little parasites. This doesn't hurt the fish. The larvae will just get a free ride for a couple of weeks. They get their oxygen, they get their food supply from the fish's blood system. This is also a really important distribution method for mussels because since they're not great at swimming or flying, they can crawl around a little bit, they can burrow up and down. That's about it. So riding around on a fish, they can disperse across the watershed and reach areas that they couldn't if they tried to just crawl there. So these fish will live there, or the glaucidia will live there as parasites for about maybe 2 to 3 weeks. Think of it like a caterpillar cooking in a cocoon. Once they're ready to transform, they will drop off. Hopefully they'll drop into appropriate habitat, and then the lucky ones will get to grow up and be adult mussels on their own. Even when they transform as juveniles, they're still not fully developed. They're still working on all their internal organs. They will burrow down into the substrate when they first drop off, and they'll do what we call pedal feeding. Basically, they just stick their foot up like a giant tongue in the water, and food particles stick to their foot, and then they suck it back in and lick it back off, basically. And they don't lick it, but it's like that. So anyway, I think it's a funny mental image of them just sticking their little foot up and collecting food. So they'll do that for a while the rest of their internal organs develop, and then they can start filtering like an adult once they've completely finished that process. So it's a complex cycle, and all the right factors have to be there to be successful. So looking at some of the benefits of freshwater mussels and the roles they play in the ecosystem, one of the most important things that they do is their filter feeding ability. Mussels eat bacteria, they eat algae, they can capture and inactivate viruses in the water. These are things that we don't love to have in our water supply, so mussels are super helpful in filtering out these things and consuming them. They're very, very effective filterers. This is a little demonstration that was set up in these two tanks. This tank on the right has about half a dozen native mussels in it. This tank on the left is just the water and sediment that's been stirred up. So they're both pretty equally turbid. And if I just let this start to cycle, you can see right away the mussels are starting to help this water settle out and removing some of this sediment that's suspended in the water. And in about 35 minutes, they've pretty much completely cleared it up. They're amazingly effective. And if you extrapolate this out on a larger scale, if you have beds of millions of mussels all filtering all day long, a good example is think about Chesapeake Bay. At one time, before pollution killed them all, Chesapeake Bay was full of oysters, very similar to mussels, operate the same way. The oyster populations in Chesapeake Bay could turn over that entire volume of water on a daily basis. They just have an amazing capacity to do this stuff, which is why these animals are this is just such an important service. They're often rightly called the livers of the rivers, helping to clean everything out. They're also, of course, a really important food source for wildlife. That's a good question. I will get to that. It depends. They're really important food for wildlife, including things like raccoons, muskrats, birds. They were also traditionally a really important food source for Native Americans. In fact, a lot of species descriptions have been in a long, long time ago were from shells that were collected at old Native American middens from archaeological sites. They were able to find a lot of shells there. So one of the other really important roles that they play is they're a really key indicator species. They're our canary in a coal mine, basically, for our water supply. And this is because of their unique life history characteristics. They have this complex life cycle that requires a specific fish. They're a filter feeder. They can't really escape anything. They're sedentary. They can be long-lived. They live anywhere. Some of the smaller species might live 10 to 20 years. Some species live in excess of 100 years. So they can be there for a long, long time. This makes them really sensitive to habitat degradation and sensitive to pollution. They can't really run away the same way that a fish might be able to. They are basically just exposed to whatever is in the water. And so if we look at a mussel population, we see that it's in trouble. This also means that we're in trouble because we both rely on the same resource. I'm just going to talk briefly about some of the threats to freshwater mussels and other aquatic wildlife. I'm not going to go into too much detail. One key one, of course, is increasing levels of what we call impervious surface on the landscape. This is any surface that doesn't allow water to penetrate the soil. This does two things. It, of course, disrupts groundwater recharge and disrupts soil filtration, but also produces massive amounts of stormwater, which is basically just like turning a fire hose on our stream and river channels. It causes huge amounts of sedimentation and erosion, blows out stream banks, and also carries everything that's coming off of those surfaces with it. Oils, pollutants, metal dust from brake pads, all this really delightful stuff just all gets washed into the stream and into mussels and farther up the food chain into animals that we eat as well. I guess some people eat mussels. I do not. Some of the other impacts that are affecting freshwater mussels include things like livestock access in streams, causes lots of erosion sedimentation, really breaking down banks. Also introduces high levels of fecal coliform, which nobody likes to eat unless you're a mussel. Sarah's going to talk to you a little bit about barriers, but these include things like dams, poorly constructed road crossings, culverts that are not installed correctly, anything that impedes animal movement between upstream and downstream. This impedes gene flow between populations, also impedes host fish movement between mussel populations, and any other types of animal movement, such as spring migrations for breeding fish, all that kind of stuff. Irresponsible recreational use does a lot of habitat damage. Of course, I'm sure there are many treatises written on point and non-point source pollutants, including pipe effluents, wastewater treatments, larger non-point source runoffs, improperly managed ag fields, all that kind of stuff can cause impacts to a watershed. And we have too the loss of our riparian buffers, either completely lost in many areas or inadequate, very narrow, isolated buffers in others. I wish everything looked like Duke Forest. Alas, it does not. But I sure do appreciate them when I see them. These perform a whole host of functions that I could probably talk about for another couple hours, but I will move on. Can we change course? Is there hope for us and hope for the mussels? Yes, there is. But it really requires that we embrace multi-pronged strategies, that we not do things the same way we did in 1960. An estimate that I looked up a while ago, so it's probably a lot higher now, is that it costs about $10 billion per year to provide clean drinking water to the US. So just on that factor alone, even if you don't care about the wildlife, it illustrates that watershed protection is critical. And this includes support for enforcing existing regulations and improving the regulations that are already on the book. Agencies like mine have way less power than you think we do, I promise. But doing things like this and being creative about approaches and really thinking about systems as a whole and using the functions that are already out there on the landscape, these will do a better job of protecting our drinking water, water quality of our water supplies, streams, habitats, and the hydrology in our watersheds, which includes things like water patterns, flood patterns and impacts, those types of things, which are really important. Seasonal patterns are really important to a lot of wildlife species. This reduces our infrastructure costs and ultimately makes our communities more attractive and more livable, as I think many of you know, especially if you get to enjoy Duke Forest on a local basis. A lot of times we hear the argument, well, isn't this going to cost more? Well, no, it doesn't. It's been very well proven that these natural resource methods are much more cost effective than some of these conventional practices. And in fact, continually eroding this natural capital just hurts our communities, it hurts our societies, and it threatens the viability of all of these factors into the future. So using these more creative factors, it reduces the cost of supplying our clean water, it reduces risk to our water supplies, flooding, storm damage are all reduced, and it helps moderate temperature in both water and land and reduces pollution to both animal communities and human communities. But I want to bring it back to this slide because these animals really are both really vulnerable and really valuable because of their unique life history and their unique ability to be an indicator species in our water supply. If a stream or a river can support a diverse native mussel community, that means it can support the human community as well. So I think it's really important that we listen to the message that they're giving to us, and I'm sharing it with you because I think the more that we know, the better choices we can make into the future, and the more we can advocate for these resources, because every one of you that speaks up for them means a lot more to the people that have power than hearing it from me. So I encourage you to do so at every opportunity. So that's all I have for you guys. I'm happy to take any questions that you have, and thank you for letting me talk to you tonight. Yes. Yeah, so the question was, can mussels survive a drought and do they all die when it dries out? And the answer is it depends. just kind of the answer to everything with mussels. They can, like I mentioned earlier, they have the ability to burrow up and down in the substrate. So if they can burrow far enough down, they can survive the drought and they can stay down in that moist substrate as long as possible, as long as some moisture stays down there. Now, this becomes a problem if you're in some of these areas where the geology is just solid bedrock and there's nowhere to go. So if they get stranded, like in an area where maybe there's an isolated pool and there's a ridge that they can't figure out how to get over, they're not huge in the brain department either. They have some abilities, but it's hard when you can't really see where you're going. So if they get stranded in an isolated area or they can't burrow down far enough, then yes, they will desiccate and they will die. Any other questions? Yes, in the back. The mussel, yeah. So the question was, when the mussels make the lures, is that genetically programmed into them? And then when the fish bite into the lure, does it kill the mussel? So as far as where the lures come from, I've always wondered how they figure it out. How does the mussel A know what a crayfish looks like and B know how to make one? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's amazing. It is genetically programmed there, but interestingly, within some species, such as the one I had on my title slide, within that species, there are multiple types of lures that you can sometimes see even in the same stream. So individuals will have slightly different lures. But for most species, it's pretty similar. So they seem to just have one that they say, well, I learned how to make this and this is what I make. How they figured that out, we don't know yet. As far as when the fish bites into the lure, nope, that doesn't affect the mussel. I probably doesn't feel great, but it doesn't hurt them long term. They don't seem to suffer any damage from that. The area where they have the lure, right beneath it, they carry the Glaucidia larvae in a section of their gill tubes, and it becomes really inflated and really fat and full of water and Glaucidia, and that's a really thin tissue. So I think it probably doesn't take much pressure to rupture it, and those just pop out, and maybe she feels relieved. I don't know. Seems like she would, my guess. Great question, though. Yes. What was the first part of the question? I don't know what that is. Are they, what was the second part? Okay. You know, I'm not sure because I'm not familiar with those or how they do those. So that's a good question to ask for the people that do them, though. I'd be happy to share the data with them if they would like. Yeah, that'd be super. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the question is, are we looking at how mussels can adapt to the demands of climate change and the changeability of our river and stream systems? And yes, there are a suite of research studies looking at that. Some of these animals already live, you know, if you're familiar with Piedmont streams, they're already pretty flashy systems. They can go from crazy flood down to almost nothing really quickly. So that will help them a little bit, but as that gets more and more extreme, what's the threshold there? So one recent study that was done by a previous technician of mine was looking at mussels' ability to adapt to salt tolerance, especially in areas where we're getting more and more salt inundation on the coast. Will our freshwater mussels be able to tolerate that? And so they looked at a couple of different aspects, taking mussels from areas that already had some salt influx and some areas that did not, and seeing how those animals responded to experimental treatments of salt. And they found that they did have some ability to survive those instances and to continue operating normally. So like many things, it's probably a question of all things in moderation, but there's so much we still don't know. I tell people that the mussel research is about at least 20 years behind fish research. There's so much we don't understand about these animals. They do not follow any of the rules of any other animals. So we're still trying to figure all these questions out, and the clock is ticking, as you all know. So yeah, but it is something we're definitely looking at and asking questions about.
Brena, thank you so much. That was an excellent presentation. And I think Brena is hanging out for the rest of the evening. So if you have more questions for her, but I do just want to get in, because we're running a little bit late, an update for you all on the pair of stream restoration projects we're working on in New Hope Creek that Brena mentioned. Okay, great. So some of you may or may not be familiar with these projects. I'm not sure, but this is really the point and why we're thinking about these. We want to improve aquatic habitat. We want to restore aquatic habitat connectivity. You heard me talk to you about terrestrial connectivity projects. We want to do this in our waterways as well. We want to stabilize stream banks. We want to recover threatened mussel species. So the Atlantic pigtoe that Brena put up in her presentation is a target of this work. And we want to maintain the vehicle and pedestrian crossing that we have provided by some of our human infrastructure out there. So how we're going to do this is through the removal of 2 in-stream human-made structures and installing a new crossing structure at one site. This yellow circle is the site of the concrete bridge. This yellow circle is the site of the already partially breached Billy Irwin Dam, and those are the 2 focal pieces of this work. Okay, and I would be remiss if I did not give a shout out to these amazing graduate students in the Nicholas School program, Jackie and Andrew, that got so excited about doing this work that they catalyzed something for me that I had been thinking about for about 10 years, and we are bringing it forward now. And a lot of it is on the backs of their enthusiasm, passion, and their absolute prowess in pulling together multifaceted natural resource projects. So the concrete bridge, many of you all know the concrete bridge, right? That was installed by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 30s. So it was a valuable structure at the time, right? They put in a low water concrete bridge with 4 metal culverts meant to be overtopped under high flows. It has been doing its job just for too long, right? And so it's created all kinds of associated impacts around that area. And I think we're at a point where we're really ready. Even the top of the surface of that bridge is starting to degrade. It needs replacement. And when we replace it, we want to get it out of the creek. We have the engineering, we have the materials, we have everything we need and need to know how to do in order to put in a human impact that serves our purposes, that doesn't degrade the ecosystem. And that's what we're going to do here. So for those of you that aren't familiar, just a couple of pictures of the bridge. You can see its state. It creates an impoundment of water upstream. Lots and lots of sediment falls out here. It has an uneven distribution of the water over the top. It's degrading lots and lots of stream bank over here. It's just really, and you know, Judd worked to maintain this structure for decades, and it's at the point where there's really no amount of maintenance we can do to mitigate the accelerating impacts that this structure has in this creek. So again, tying into Brena's story, part of why Brena is one of our most valuable partners in this work right now, we've got the federally threatened Atlantic pigtoe mussel. We know lives up here. We've got one of its preferred host species, the creek chub. We know it lives down here. Here's that barrier, that concrete bridge. So this story is really an ecological story of trying to do good in promoting the expansion and the recovery of this federally threatened species, and really, again, reuniting the animals that are part of the entire ecology of New Hope Creek. So that Billy Irwin Dam, that's my second, it's about 2 stream miles downstream. And actually, that is the wrong location. That should be right here. It's correct on my other slides. But essentially, this has a kind of wonky history of being built up in the 1900s to generate some hydroelectric power, that not ever really being something this dam was needed to then actually do. The creek itself has blown out this downstream side of it right now. But because this remnant structure remains, you know, almost 100 years on, or it is 100 years on, again, the water forcing is degrading and tearing down stream bank here. As that hydrologic force comes around this bend and it releases, it's putting a bunch of sediment into the creek. So that's the stream bank degradation. This is an island that's getting formed by all the sediment that comes careening around the structure and then drops out of the water column as it slows down. So again, just this remnant human-made structure that's really not ever served a purpose for us. We never ended up using it. It's definitely not doing anything for us now, except actively degrading this ecosystem. So we'd like to get in there and just take it down. We don't want to do anything fancy here. We don't need to convey people or vehicles across the creek here. Most of these materials are probably sourced from this area. We can use them to try to shore up these banks. And that's really, it's a smaller project, but a really important one. So collaboration is absolutely key in natural resources in general. I'm going to show you a table of the partners that we're working with. You know, of course, engineers. Of course, I'm part of an institution. I have to work with my facilities folks. We've relied on national conservation nonprofits like American Rivers for advice and review of this project. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service cares a lot about what we're doing because we're working on a federally threatened species. We may even end up getting some in-kind construction support from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service team out of South Carolina. Wildlife Resources Commission, again, our state agency that is responsible for essentially all the animals in our state that aren't on a federal list. I've been partnering with Brena to understand how the presence of mussels or not will impact the permitting we need. And we have gotten in the creek together and surveyed for the mussels that are in and around these structures. And now we also have a plan to actually relocate some mussels when we actually get to construction of these projects. Triangle Land Conservancy has been a major partner in the regional connectivity work, and they've been a major partner for us as Duke, as an institution that's an educational nonprofit that can't go after the North Carolina Land and Water Fund grants. You have to be an environmental nonprofit, but it's perfectly okay to partner. So we are partnered up with the Triangle Land Conservancy. We submitted a Land and Water Fund grant together and have learned in September that we received $900,000 from the state. So this is all great news. This is not yet contracted, so there's a lot of devil in the detail there, but we're moving. So I just want to mention to you, you know, we've done a feasibility study on replacing that concrete bridge. Here are all the criteria we applied to select the kind of material and design of the bridge we would use. And essentially, the long story short is that we are going to replace that concrete bridge with a clear slab concrete bridge that can handle pretty heavy vehicle weight, will be passable in nearly all conditions. It'll be about 10 to 12 feet above average surface water levels, and it will be completely clear span. At first, the engineering firm proposed something that had some footers in the creek, and I said, get the footers out of the creek. We can do this, and we can. And it actually really wasn't that much more expensive to get essentially what's going to be 60 feet of 3-foot wide slabs 5 of them together. It'll be a 15-foot wide bridge. That's what we're going for right now. We've got feasibility design done. What we're sort of on the cusp of is moving into that final engineering and design phase. So ultimately, this is pretty massive, but the structure might look something like that. Here's the timeline. Again, we've got $900K awarded to this project. It's not everything we need. To build a 60-foot wide clear span bridge is a lot of money. But we're working on it. We are getting there. We've got excellent partners with the state. We may have federal partners doing some in-kind work, and we're seeing what else we can figure out in terms of financing the entire project. The ideal piece is that we would be relocating Mussels, building the new bridge, removing the old bridge, removing the old dam at the end of 2024. That's the plan. So stay tuned. You're going to hear a lot about this in 2024. I am honestly on the cusp of really being able to move, but there's a lot of pieces that have to come together. But that's where we're at. And I want to share with you, okay, I really covered this already. This will be much more fun. So this was us when we got to work with Brena and her team. We actually got to just get in wetsuits, put on snorkels, and go swimming. It was amazing, really skimming. We weren't swimming, we were skimming, and we were collecting mussels. Well, some of us were collecting a lot more than others. Andy was with us. It was an incredibly amazing time. These are some of the mussels that we found. And so again, just really grateful for that partnership. I think we're doing a lot of good for freshwater mussels, even with the work we've just done to reintroduce some notched rainbow that were propagated from animals collected upstream. So very exciting project. I hope that you all stay tuned. And now I am going to, why don't I actually just take maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then Blake is going to close us out with the presentation of the Clarence Korstian Award. But does anybody want to talk a little bit more about any of that project work I just presented? Yeah. Yes, so actually Brena and I were just talking about that a little bit. There's even some work to do with the animals that were just reintroduced, maybe doing some monitoring. And you may have noticed on the timeline that I sped through, but we hope to do some more education and outreach work once I can get the nuts and bolts of the projects continuing to move forward, to do some more education and outreach and engagement events where people can help us do the work. Yeah. Awesome. Yes. Yes. So on that Duke, on the Duke Forest edge where there's the trail, I think all we're going to do is really try to reinforce, use some of that stone that came from that area and reinforce some of that. We might do some live plantings, but I think until we really get that done, we do have money in the budget to do any additional bank work that we might need, but so far what we think is that the bank work is what's already exposed, what we can see, if that makes sense. On your side of the creek, because there's that, the geology is right there, the bedrock is right there, it should be in good, solid shape. And we're essentially, by getting rid of that, we're just going to let New Hope Creek achieve its own dynamic equilibrium again. Over time, that little island will go away, although unless maybe we have a big storm event and there's a big pulse, maybe it will go a little faster. But yes, yep. Awesome. Well, I thank you all so much for your attention. I'm going to turn it over to Blake to present the Clarence Korstian Award and then wrap it up.
Great. All right, everyone. This is the last bit. Thank you, Sara. Yeah. Thank you, Brena. Thank you, everyone who's come out today. This is a treat to do in person again. We did this last in 2019 in this room. And I heard a couple people say, yeah, we were here last year. And that was, how many years ago? It was 3 years ago, 4 years ago? 4 years. I can't even do public math right now, so I won't. So thank you again for joining us tonight. We come to an important part of this event, and that is to continue a tradition of honoring those who have shown exceptional dedication to our cherished Duke Forest. Tonight, we proudly present the Clarence F. Korstian Award, an accolade that recognizes exemplary support for this invaluable natural gem. This award bears the name of the founding director of the Duke Forest and holds a rich legacy. Throughout the years, we have bestowed this honor upon volunteers, some of you in this room, champions of our cause, also in this room, and former staff, also in this room. These are individuals who have embodied the spirit of commitment and stewardship that Dr. Korstian himself exemplified. A luminary in the field of forestry, Korstian left an indelible mark on the landscape of North Carolina and its silviculture. From 1930, when he assumed the directorship of the Duke University Research and Demonstration Forest, to becoming the founding dean of the University School of Forestry, now the Nicholas School, that was in 1938. To his retirement in 1959, Dr. Korstian played a pivotal role in shaping the future of forestry education and practice. That's him. His legacy lives on through our work and through that of the Nicholas School of the Environment. As we end this evening, let us be inspired by his remarkable legacy and celebrate those among us who continue to embody his spirit of unwavering commitment to the Duke Forest. Hear, hear. So, and we've mentioned his name a number of times tonight. The Korstian Division is such an important part of the forest that was named in his honor. So the recipient of the 2023 Clarence F. Korstian Award is Beverly R. Burgess. Love to hear that applause. I know she will too. Beverly, or Bev as she is known, received this award back in May at her retirement party. And we additionally planted a white oak tree inside of Gate F last December in her honor. Beverly could not join us tonight, but we will make sure she gets the recording. Originally hired by Judd Edinburgh, her journey with the Office of the Duke Forest spanned 16 years, during which she witnessed the ebb and flow of staff, the evolution of the forest itself, and the myriad transformations that define the cycles of this unique land base. Every day, her steady presence set the tone for our team. She answered calls from the public, many of you, as she involved invoice researchers for their electricity use and handled all of our financials. She mailed out our old paper maps, remember those? And booked shelters for the community. She ran the deer herd reduction program. She also spearheaded the Pinecone Pacer race every April. And this very event was one of her annual things. She did much of the unseen work that kept a dynamic teaching and research forest operating. Though, with this award, we reflect on the tenure of someone whose impact went far beyond those daily tasks and responsibilities. Bev held an important space at the heart of our team. She was a friend to all, a trusted counselor for countless Nicholas School staff and students, and a familiar voice on the other end of the phone line for many of you. She was loyal to the core, and she had an unwavering passion for this forest. So join me in congratulating Bev and wishing that her next adventure be as extraordinary as the legacy she left with us. Thank you. Thank you, Bev. She would be running this thing if she was here. So I just want to remind everyone that the our annual report, the Duke Forest Log, is ready. It is out. It is on the way to mailboxes right now. Anyone receive it yet? I'd love. Really? Wow. That's amazing. We just got it yesterday. That's great. And so it will also be in inboxes soon as well. Finally, we have some upcoming events that are coming up. Some volunteers know that there's an observatory night coming up. Our research tour is at capacity 3 times over. We're going to have to figure something out there. Duke's Centennial is next year. I'm not sure if any of you are aware of it, but there is a special event on 1/9/24. That's 1924. That's what it spells. The community science applications for the any community science volunteers in here tonight? Oh, let me hear some whoops. Whoop. Okay, that'll be in February. The community science launch and the forest steward applications will happen in March. Any forest stewards in here?
Yay!
Got to be louder than the herb volunteers. Okay. No, yeah. And then the forest stewards will launch in April, and then our annual flora and fauna tour with anyone named Nikki Cagle in here? Woo! Yeah. And then finally, mark your calendars. We are hosting a very big event on campus in place of this annual gathering next year. We are funded by the Centennial Committee to do a big event that will be sharing the history and the future of the Duke Forest with the president, with Vice President, Vice Provost Toddy Steelman, Sara, and Nikki. That's going to be awesome, and that'll be on campus. So please mark your calendars for that. I want to thank anyone in here who's a donor to the Duke Forest and is a friend of the Duke Forest. Any of those in here?
Woo!
More enthusiastic in private, I know. Thank you so much for being a part of the forest and for engaging with us. And if you have any questions about giving to the forest, please talk to me. I'd be glad, or talk to any of us. And I am done. Thank you so much for being here.
Yay! So my concluding remark is thank you. Thank you all so very much. Thank you to the Duke Forest team. Thank you to the Duke Forest students and faculty and researchers. I appreciate you all so much. It's really such an honor to be here and present the Duke Forest to y'all tonight. So thank you again.